Spurgeon here with RevZilla, and today we're going to be taking a look at Triumph's all-new Striple RS. You're probably thinking to yourself, well then why the hell is he talking to me on a Daytona? Well, this isn't any Daytona. This is a 2006 Daytona, the first year that Triumph introduced the 675 Triple. It was an odd duck engine for the time, and it really took Triumph in an all-new direction, because not only did they use it in this bike, but they introduced it in their Street Triple line. The Street Triple became the distant cousin of the Daytona and the smaller sibling to the Speed Triple.
And here's the bike you were actually looking to see when you clicked on this review, the 2018 Street Triple RS. Now the Street Triple line has been Triumph's Goldilocks forever. It's the bike that was not too street, but also not too track. There have been a bunch of updates for 2018. The big one, is the new 765cc triple engine. But that's not the only thing. Triumph updated a bunch of...
Before you give this whole review away, we need to start by diving into the history of this motorcycle. We're going to pull over to do that. So while we're looking for a spot to pull over, you can go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube so you can keep up with all the content we have rolling out at RevZilla.com. Lem, I got just the place. Hit it. So as I mentioned, in 2006, Triumph gave us a brand new ground-up Daytona 675, and this bike was important not just for Triumph's line, but for the motorcycle industry in general, because it really dispelled the expectations of what a middleweight sport bike had to be. It got rid of that inline-4 design and ushered in an all-new engine, a 675cc triple. But the problem was, at its heart, this bike was still an aggressive sport bike. So what Triumph decided to do was they decided to take that wildly popular 675 engine and they introduced it in a new model. And in 2008, the Street Triple was born.
That's right, Spurge, and that's when we started seeing these things just about everywhere. Now these are the headlights off the Speed Triple, but we also started seeing them on the Street Triple, and it seemed like they multiplied like rabbits. Now, if you look at this thing, you'll notice that the Daytona headlights obviously aren't going to work on this Street Triple. That's why we saw these on the first-gen bikes. There's no plastic. It's a naked standard bike. Now, Triumph, of course, used some other ingredients for that recipe too that have been time-tested and work out well. They swapped out the clip-ons and instead stuck on a set of handlebars, and they also made the rear sets much less aggressive, giving the rider a posture that was a little bit more neutral and more conducive to street riding. Now, some riders felt, though, that the Street Triple was maybe a little bit too soft, so Triumph responded in 2009 by offering the R model. For a very modest $800, riders could upgrade the suspension and brakes. Now, those two models of the bike were so popular, they remained relatively unchanged up until 2012, when these went away in a controversial redesign.
So Lem is correct. You got a facelift, which lost those round headlights, but it wasn't until a year later when they actually changed the internals of what the Street Triple was. The engine got retuned, it dropped 13 pounds with the new underbelly exhaust, and the whole bike just took a more aggressive approach. And then a few years later, the RX was born. This is a third version of the Street Triple. And when you look at it compared to what the R was, it got a quick shifter, a facelift, as well as the rear subframe off of a Daytona. But other than that, it was relatively unchanged until this year. What Triumph has done now is they've introduced an all-new line of Street Triple motorcycles. The heartbeat's now going to be a 765cc engine that's tuned differently in each version of the bike. And there's some other changes as well. Each of these models is now going to be distinctly different from one another. So that leaves us with a question: who is this new line of Street Triple motorcycles for?
You know, Spurge, I'm interested in finding that out myself. So why don't we take this thing where the name implies we should, for a little ride on the street. Street Triple has always been an enormously competent motorcycle, if not marked by a little lack of differentiation between some of its submodels. Take for instance the motor in here. That 675cc Triple, which was plucked from the Daytona, was retuned for lots of middle range power, and it's a very flexible power plant. Probably explains why Triumph used it across the entire Street Triple line up until now. Now, getting into an R model was always a good idea. For not too much money, you got 4-pot Nissan calipers on the front. You also got a full KYB adjustable suspension on there. Jumping up into the RX, though, which you can see me on right now, made a little bit less sense. Some of the upgrades were more subtle, and it was a bigger jump monetarily. For instance, things like the quick shifter as well as the lap time were very track-oriented, and then a lot of the upgrades were really cosmetic in nature. Fortunately for 2018, Triumph has changed that.
So, the bike has been revamped and the RS is now the flagship of this line. And one of the things it's retained is that all-day comfort you'd expect from this motorcycle, but the rest of the changes are going to be very noticeable. Starting with the engine. It's going to be a 765cc engine, but it's now going to be retuned for different purpose within the S, the R, and the RS models. The S is going to be your basic model, which is going to give you the least amount of horsepower, and torque is going to hit lower in the rev range. And then when you get up into the RS, you're going to get maximum horsepower, and it's going to peak further in the rev range. In addition to the engine changes that you're going to see throughout the models, you're also going to see some component changes. Now, the S and the R is going to be very similar to what you used to see with the base and the R version. You're going to get upgrades in brakes as well as suspension, but in addition to those upgrades, you're also going to get a bump in electronics. When you go to the R version, you're going to get the addition of the TFT dash, where you can actually see in front of me on this RS. Now, this dash is going to allow you to control different rider modes, and rider modes are new for 2018, and they're going to control 3 distinct functions of this motorcycle. They're going to control throttle response, they're going to control ABS, and they're also going to control traction control. So starting with the S model, you're going to have 2 different rider modes available, rain and road. Rain and road are going to limit power in first and second gear, and the throttle response is going to be much more tamed down. Bumping up into the R version is going to give you 2 additional rider modes. Rider, which is completely programmable, and then Sport mode. And Sport mode is going to give you a more aggressive throttle response, and it's going to give you full power in first and second gear. Now, when you get up into the RS, this gives you a 5th mode, track. Now, the problem becomes, this is almost unusable for street use. Even the Sport mode, the throttle was very twitchy. I would assume that regardless of which bike riders go with, they'll spend most of their time in the road mode for regular street use. Now, like Lem mentioned, the bump from the R to the RX really didn't give you much in previous generations other than a facelift. But with the RS, you get much more than just an aesthetic upgrade. You're getting even stronger brakes than what are found on the R version. You're getting a more aggressive suspension setup. You're getting different tires, which are going to be more track oriented. There's a real reason as to why someone would want to jump to the RS. So in order to fully evaluate the RS, we need to take it to a more appropriate environment. More appropriate location. We're at New Jersey Motorsports Park, hanging out with the folks at Team Promotion, and we are lucky enough to have them invite us along for a track day where we get to put this RS through its paces. Now, the last time I was out here, I was on an S1000RR, which is a completely different beast. But what amazes me is how competent this bike is here on the racetrack. Now, the engine on this has been completely retuned. Pulls ridiculously hard up top where the old one didn't. You know, I talked to a lot of guys that have taken the old Street Triple to the track, and their biggest thing was that it just didn't have enough oomph up top. And here, this bike really starts to pull even more so than the other bikes. Now, in addition to the engine that's been tuned differently, you're getting the larger M50 monoblock calipers up front. But it's not just about that great stopping power that you can see right there. It's also about the MCS levers, which are now fully adjustable, not just for how far you want that lever to sit away from your hand, but also how progressive you want those brakes to come on. And when you throw in the corner, the suspension on this is that big piston Showa with that Ulm setup out back, both fully adjustable. Man, everything just starts to slide around very nicely. And you also have to keep in mind that from an electronic standpoint, this has a track mode as well that allows for additional wheel slip from traction control, as well as wheel lift from ABS, so you can get more aggressive braking, but without completely disabling those safety features. Now, as I come down the straightaway here, you'll also notice there's going to be a quick shifter. So, no clutches needed. Just go ahead and bump right through. This thing is awesome. I'm going to go spin a few more laps and then head into the pits and see if I can't find what Lemmy's up to.
Well, what'd you think?
Lem, I will tell you what, my friend, this bike really came into its own out there. It's funny, all those things that we really thought were just too aggressive for the street really feel at home out there on the racetrack. I mean, the engine just pulls hard all the way to the red line. The chassis and suspension, I mean, it's gotta be one of the most competent chassis that I've seen in a middleweight motorcycle. I mean, this thing just belongs on a racetrack.
Yeah, I'm not really surprised to hear you say that, because this thing is a real handful on the street. Still though, I'm not convinced that this is carrying on the Street Triple legacy. What was the name of this again?
Street Triple.
Right,
yeah.
Not the Track Triple. So to me, it's sort of drifted a little bit from the Street Triple I remember. Let's go back to that motor you were just talking about. You're right, there's a ton of high-end power in this engine. The problem is I can't access it when I'm out there riding around in the street very easily without breaking every speed limit there is out there. I mean, this thing really hit home for me how much I wanted to try out a Street Triple R. I think it'd be more appropriate for my riding style.
Dude, I agree with you 100%. And I can honestly see the Street Triple R as the bike that most riders will end up on. But it gets back to that question that we asked earlier. You know, who is this new line of Street Triples for? And I think if you look at the S and the R, that's very much your original traditional Street Triple consumer, right? Then you get up to the RS, and this really speaks to an all-new consumer within the Street Triple lineup. This is for the rider that either can't afford or doesn't want a dedicated track bike. They want something that's more comfortable in the street than what a Daytona is going to give them, but they still want all the bells and whistles. They still want all that extra performance on the track, and that's what the RS gives. It is for a completely new rider, I believe.
You know, I think regardless of whether or not a consumer is familiar with the Striple line or they're totally new to it, it really can't be overstated enough how different the submodels of the Striple actually are.
Well, I think you make a great point with that, Lem. A lot of times folks will look at, well, if some is good, then more must be better. And in this case, that just doesn't ring true because each of these is so very distinct in its purpose. If you're looking at this and you're thinking, man, the RS is just the best one for me, and you're just commuting back and forth to the office, this is going to be very disappointing and it's going to be overkill. But again, it really comes down to figuring out the style of riding you want to do and then choosing the appropriate bike for you. Now, if you're still on the fence as to whether or not the RS has a place in your garage, now would be a great time to head over to Common Tread where you can read my full ride review of the RS where we get into a little bit more than nitty gritty. Now, you also want to make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube so you can keep up with all the content the big guy and I are rolling out. From full ride reviews like this one to product reviews and gear reviews, there's a ton of content for you at RevZilla.com. As for Lem and I, this SOB owes me another ice cream cone, so we're going to head over to our local creamery and get some more frozen treats. Thank you for joining us for this full ride review of Triumph's new Street Triple RS. I'm Spurge. This is Lem. Enjoy the ride.